Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today it is finally time to discuss Palantir's Q2 earnings. I did a live stream this morning. Thank you for the 800 people that joined. Lots of things to discuss. We're going to go through the numbers. I want to give you my top line sort of overall thesis of how I'm feeling, and then we're going to get deeper into some of the numbers. Also guys, before I get into the video, if you want exclusive Palantir audio content, I have just launched a new startup. It's called Audea, AUDEA.io. There's a Palantir channel on there where all my articles from Daily Palantir are now uploaded in audio format on that channel or on that app. So you can download the app on the Google or iOS App Store, subscribe to Daily Palantir, and you can get all your audio content for Palantir content, all the articles that I create in audio format on that application. So definitely check it out if you're interested in Palantir content in audio format. First of all, I am not as bearish as everyone who has been bearish around Palantir, primarily because I thought the quarter was actually pretty good. I know growth was not phenomenal. I know growth was not amazing. I know the outlook does not look amazing. I'm giving them a little bit of leniency here, given that we're in a macroeconomic headspin or headwinds. I do wish they would do some stuff with the cash that they have on their balance sheets, but I also think that they know a lot about what's going on in the world geopolitically, and they're trying to save some of their cash. So overall, I'm not selling any of my Palantir shares. I'm not necessarily buying the dip yet. I think maybe we could hit 8 or 7, and then I'm going to be a little bit more eager to buy. But I also think the pre-action was down 14% from 11 to 9, and then it stuck in 9, went up to a little bit 10. Now it's stuck in like the 990 range. I am not bearish on what I saw in earnings. There's nothing that has necessarily changed my thesis. Would I like to see some things improve? Absolutely, like all of us will. But given what's happened in the macro economy, given the recession we're having, given that Palantir is not a product that businesses 1000% need, meaning you have to actually sell the product to businesses, I think they had a pretty good quarter from what I've seen, just based on that. So let's get into the numbers right now, and I'll sort of give my thoughts on some of the stuff that I think is important to me, and some of the stuff that I do want to see change. So revenue grew 26% year over year to 473 million. Now they said they would do about 470, so they beat revenue expectations by $1 million. I mean, it's barely anything, but nonetheless, they didn't miss expectations, which I thought was pretty good. US revenue grew 45% year over year to 290 million. Commercial revenue grew 46%, and US commercial revenue grew 120%. A lot of people are saying US commercial revenue is not, or the commercial sector is not as strong because the governmental sector is kind of overshadowing. I don't feel that's the case. I think when the US commercial count increased 250% year over year from 34 customers Q2 2021 to 119 Q2 2022, would we want it to be more? Yes. The fact that it's actually increasing upwards of almost 300% year over year, I mean, that's good. There's not that much more you can ask. Could they be more aggressive? Yes. Could they sell even harder? Yes. But at the end of the day, it's not like 70%, 60%. I mean, they're putting up the 250%. That's pretty good in my opinion. Revenue growing 26% year over year. Look, Alex Karp and management has said 30% year over year growth is going to happen until 2025. They are not on track to get 30% year over year growth right now, particularly because they have also guided, if we look a little bit lower, for a revenue between 475 and 470 million for the next quarter, which means revenue next quarter is going to be flat. Last quarter, there was 5% quarter per quarter growth. I think we had like 443 and then we got to 470. Now we're at 474 to 473. So as a result of that, they're not going to be growing as much as we thought they were growing quarter to quarter. Now that is one of the parts that is one of the more disappointing parts to me, because it's like, all right, you put up 470 million in one quarter. You would think, you're going to put up more than 470 next quarter, but it's staying relatively the same. And now their guidance has gone down a little bit as well. They were expecting closer to 2 billion in revenue. That's down about 100 million. We expect revenue between 1.9 and 1.920 billion, and adjusted income from operations 340 to 343 million. This would be the theoretical profit, but it's not really the profit because they're unprofitable on a generally accepted accounting principles basis. This revised guidance excludes any new US major government awards, and we believe this to be the base case. So there is the potential for upside if they are able to get some more US government contracts, which, theoretically they should be able to get, given how Karp was talking on the shareholder call that I'm going to talk about in a second. But we're going to see if we're able to get this. Adjusted free cash flow, 61 million. Cash from operations, 62 million. US commercial count increased 250%. We talked about that. US governmental revenue grew 27% year over year. Now, the government rev is not growing as strong as it should be growing. And Karp talked about this a lot in the shareholder call. He was almost banging his fist on the table, primarily because he was saying that it's really difficult to land a lot of these governmental deals, especially when they're not set in stone. He went so far as to say that most people in the government don't even like Palantir. They had to sue them in order to win a contract. So they still buy Palantir stuff because the technology is that good, but to get these deals is harder. And it's harder when, budgets aren't approved, and we've seen that budgets haven't been approved for a while. So these things just get pushed out into the future. Palantir is still going to do the work. They're just not necessarily going to get paid for that. So that was another thing that he, was a bit upset about as well. Total contract value closed 792 million, including including US total contract value, closed $588 million as well. Now, revenue on a trailing 12 months is about $1.04 billion. They didn't show the CAGR with the compounded annual growth rate within the actual presentation itself, which pissed off a lot of people because they weren't really showing some of those numbers in a meaningful way. And I could also understand that. There's some things where it's just almost like you feel like they're kind of hiding at some point. So again, same basic numbers. Net dollar retention, 119%. This is actually a little bit lower than net dollar retention last time. You'd want it to be a little bit more at 130. So that's all right. Total customer count grew 80% year over year. They added 27 net new customers in Q2 2022, up 10% quarter over quarter. Not horrible. Average revenue stayed relatively the same, 17% growth. Commercial customer count, this is good, not amazing, but it's not the worst. Deals closed up 67% from last year versus this year. Again, that doesn't mean all the money comes. That just means the deal is closed and they have performance obligations to get there over time. They also ended Q2 2022 with $3.5 billion in total remaining deal value. Last year, they had about $3.4 billion. So this is $3.5 billion that they will collect over time as it happens. And remaining performance obligations grew 79% year over year to $1.2 billion. Now, let's talk about what this actually means at the end of the day and what are my overall thoughts on how I'm feeling around Palantir. I don't think this was a bad quarter. And I think people who say this is a bad quarter, from a short-term perspective, yes, you could say it's a bad quarter. From a long-term perspective, if I believe in the technology, I believe in the growth, I believe in the potential of the company to be what it can be, then it is what it is, right? This is one of those quarters that in the short term, it sucks. It's not fun. Like you hate to see it, but eventually, things should get better from here over time. I think there's two things that are important to talk about. From a macro perspective, we are in a recession and Palantir is a discretionary spending item. It's not something that businesses absolutely need, which means their sales force has to ramp up and be able to sell these products. And if they're not selling at the level where they're growing 30, 40% quarter over quarter, or even year over year, and we'll see how they end the year. Last year, they grew 41% year over year, which after being in business for 18 years to be able to do that, obviously very impressive. Now it's a question of, can you actually get those deals done? Can you actually get that revenue in? And then can you become profitable from that? Their GAAP operating margins stayed flat at around 9% or negative 9%, which means they're not getting closer to profitability, which gets me to my next point on the shareholder call. That was not the best thing to hear in the world, but is that Palantir doesn't assume they're going to be profitable until 2025. And this was probably, if I had to say one thing that was like the worst thing, like, okay, the revenues, I get it. It's not the best. Growth is relatively flat. Even though we're in a recession, I'm giving you a little bit of leeway here. I understand the sales force. You had 25 people last year. You have like 200 now. You are hiring more people, which is going to put a dent into margins. The part I didn't like was the profitability, because that means until the next, you have 10 quarters. You have 8 quarters, 2023, 2024, and then you have 2 more quarters, 2022. If you don't expect profitability until 2025, then that means your GAAP operating margin of negative 9% is not going to become 0%, right? Break even anytime soon. It's going to be another 2.5 years. That was the part that annoyed me a bit. Now, is that a thesis breaker? Not necessarily, because if you believe they're building technology for the long term, they don't have to be profitable in the short term. I mean, you can give them time to get there, especially if you believe they have a monopolistic business where they're going to have such a competitive advantage that it's going to be harder to anyone to catch up with them. But the fact that they are not profitable in the short term, it sucks. Wall Street's not going to like it either. Either they have insane growth in the next quarters, 30, 40, 50%, like real growth numbers, 60, 70%. Like they're just banging and they're getting this product out there. They introduce a freemium model. They're getting these small, mid-sized businesses, not just working with governments and institutions, or, there's a massive geopolitical event that really accelerates them into the mainstream to the point where they're generating even more revenue, to the point where they can accelerate growth and accelerate the potential for profitability. Or they're going to be taking this slowly over the next 2 years. And we have to see what happens. I think that would be the one thing that like annoyed me the most. I was like, okay, I thought you guys would get to profitability around 2024. And now that it's another year away, that's the part that sucks. So, I mean, those are my overall thoughts. Now, in terms of the actual earnings call, I do think the earnings call wasn't the best for Karp. Him banging on the table, I'm biased. I like that because I like the personality and the philosophy, and like, he goes super deep. But it did seem like he was a bit more agitated. And why was he agitated? I don't necessarily know. Probably because the numbers weren't that great. And so because he was that agitated, because he was kind of all over the place, there was a little bit of, it was shaky just listening to him. I also didn't like how they did the web call. There was no video. It was kind of just like, it kind of felt robotic in the beginning. Like I wish it was a little bit structured to be better, just like they did for the Q4 2021. I mean, they had a nice whole lounge and then like they put on a production. When the numbers aren't that good, obviously they don't want to probably put on that production. So, I mean, Sham, he was fine on the call, but again, he kind of sounded more just like the way he sounds. There was nothing any of the people in management said that made you feel like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. It was to the point where Karp got upset because he's almost like, you're asking me quarter for quarter growth. And he's like, I care about the business 2 years from now. I don't care about quarter for quarter growth. And he was quite visibly upset. He was like, look, you're asking me about these questions about quarter growth. I don't care. I mean, he quite literally said, like, I just don't care about that. I care about what's going to happen in the next 2 years. And because I care about what's happening in the next 2 years, that's what my focus is on. And I think we will get there in the next 2 years, which is why profitability 2025 makes sense in terms of his mindset, because that's where he sees the company heading. He also says the company should be heading to about 4.5 billion in revenue in 2025. That's under some expectations of $5.5 billion in revenue. He still believes 30% CAGR, right, over the next 5-10 years. The question is just how you get there. And he did mention at one point that when they were growing their governmental business, they were growing 30% year over year, but there were some years where it was negative or flat just because of the politics of working with the government. They believe that'll be the same here, excluding the commercial sector. It's just a question of how they're going to be able to get those years at the end to average the way you want them to average versus every single year putting up those numbers. And I don't know if Wall Street's going to respect that. I don't know if Wall Street's going to see through that. I don't know how Wall Street thinks of that. So these are my raw thoughts. I will obviously be making more videos in the future. I'm looking forward to understanding a lot more of what's going on with the company. My thesis has not changed. I have not sold a single share. I've not bought the dip yet. But you know, to go from 11 to 9, I don't know. Maybe it goes to 7, maybe it goes to 8. Who knows? Maybe it goes to 6. I don't know. Or maybe it just bounces back. I still believe the macro headwinds have made Palantir an undervalued company, which means we could see it back to the levels that it was 16, 18, 17, 20, 25 when things get better. But they would have to put up some growth to be able to show that as well. So we're going to see with this one. We're going to see what happens. I am still long the stock. I believe in the company. I believe in management. I believe in the technology. I just have to see now how they play out, and their go-to market strategy and their sales and execution is going to be the differentiating variable between them being just a basic SaaS company and them really being a dominant monster. And I believe Karp wants to be that dominant monster. I believe Thiel wants to do that as well. And I trust in those guys that they'll be able to do it. But I'm going to give it another few quarters to really see what's going on, right? I want to see what happens all of 2023. I don't want to sell in the next 2 quarters. That's not my intention here. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you guys think as well. Interested and curious to hear what anyone thinks about this. Obviously, I know this quarter wasn't the nicest for everyone. It left a little sour taste in people. It's in a recession right now. I think they did the best they could do, and hopefully they could do a little bit more better. They could put some of their $2.4 billion in cash to use and get some more stuff done. But ultimately, we're going to see what happens. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. Exclusive daily Palantir audio content. Link in the description for a new audio platform where you can get that audio content. And I'll see you in the next one.